Chapter 12. There she was, he thought, her canine companion at her side, and those eyes of hers so carefully guarded he just knew they held secrets. She didn't project annoyance this time, and still she watched every move he made when he climbed out of the truck with the pizza and a 6-pack of Rolling Rock. They kept watching him when he stepped onto the porch, leaned in and kissed her. "Hi." "Hi." She stepped back, then went through the locking up routine. "You brought beer. I have wine breathing, but—"
"That'll work, too. We'll just put this in the fridge."
He passed her the 6-pack, then pulled a rawhide bone out of his pocket.
"Something for Bert, if it's okay."
The gift touched her. Ploy or not, she thought it showed kindness. "He won't take it from you."
"You give it to him, then."
He handed her the bone, saw Bert's eyes click between the two of them, the rawhide, but the dog didn't move a muscle. "It was very nice of you. He likes them." She turned to the dog, murmured a command. Bert's butt hit the floor.
"That wasn't French."
"Italian." She gave Bert the bone, followed it with another command.
"He speaks Italian, too. That's some sophisticated dog. He's smiling."
"Dogs don't smile."
"Give me a break. Look at those eyes. He's smiling. Where do you want the pizza?"
"The kitchen's best. You're in a good mood."
"I'm about to have pizza with a pretty woman, one who goes for hot peppers, a personal favorite." And she opened wine. "I'm off duty until 800 hours. I'd be stupid not to be in a good mood."
"You're not stupid." She got down wine glasses. "And though your job includes a high stress factor, you rarely appear stressed. That I've observed."
"I like the job."
"But if your father hadn't become ill, you'd still be in Little Rock."
"Yeah, probably. I was meant to come home, take this job, and settle back here."
She shook her head as she got out plates. It occurred to her she did have more conversation. "There's no such thing as predestination or fate or destiny. Life is a series of choices and circumstance, action and the reaction and results of other people's choices. Your father's illness influenced you to choose this position at this time. I think it was a loving and loyal choice, but it wasn't meant." He poured the wine himself.
"I believe in choice, and in fate."
"How? We can't have choice and free will and still be fated."
"It's a puzzle, isn't it?"
He looked so natural in her kitchen, in her space, with his jeans and t-shirt, his high-top sneakers and battered leather jacket. Should she be concerned about that?
"Why don't we eat out on the back porch? It's a pretty night."
That threw her. She never ate outside, and never went outside without a weapon.
"Look at the wheels turn."
He flicked a finger down her temple.
"You've been cooped up working most of the day, I imagine. I can't believe you bought this place if you don't appreciate a soft spring night."
Just another choice, she thought. "All right." She opened the drawer, took out her holster. "I don't go outside without my gun."
"Okay."
The Glock 19 again, apparently a favorite.
"I wish you'd tell me what you're afraid of."
"I'm not afraid." If it was a lie, it was a small one. She considered herself too well prepared and secured for real fear. "I prefer to have a gun when I'm outside."
"All right."
He waited while she put it on, unlocked the kitchen door.
"But when you decide to tell me, I'll find a way to help you."
"How do you know I'm not a criminal, a fugitive from justice?"
"Do you believe in instinct?"
"Yes, of course. It's—"
"You don't have to explain. Just put it down to instinct."
She had a little table on the porch, a single chair. Brooks set the pizza down, went inside for her desk chair.
"It's nice out here. The view, the air. You've started your garden."
He took the desk chair, sipped his wine.
What do you have in the greenhouse?
Plants, flowers, some vegetables. I have some small fruit trees. They do very well in the greenhouse environment.
I bet.
At her signal, Bert lay down by her feet and began to gnaw on his bone.
He's smiling again.
This time, she shook her head, but smiled a little too. You have a fanciful nature.
Maybe it offsets that stress.
He took the pizza she served him, balanced the plate on his lap, then, stretching out his legs, held his silence. She did the same.
You're not going to ask, he decided. That's some control you've got there, Abigail.
Excuse me?
I said I had news, but you're not going to ask about it. Most people wouldn't have waited 3 minutes to ask.
Maybe it was another ploy.
Not this time.
He waited a few beats, sighed hugely.
Now you're not going to ask because you're messing with me.
Her smile bloomed again, and damned if he didn't feel a sense of victory every time he made those lips curve.
All right, if you're going to nag about it, I'll tell you. I took your advice, rescued a pup from the pound for my mother.
Is she pleased?
She cried, in a good way. My sister texted me today that I was a suck-up and Ma still likes her better. That's the middle of us. She was kidding, he added when Abigail frowned. We like to rag on each other. After an intense debate, during which I ate my burger and kept my mouth shut, the happy parents named their new child, because, believe me, he'll be treated like one, Plato. My dad wanted Bob or Sid, but my mother claims the puppy looked philosophic and very bright and deserves an important name.
It's a good name. Names with strong consonant sounds are easier to use in training. It's good news. Happy news.
I think so.
He pulled his phone off his belt.
Got a picture of him.
He scrolled through, offered it. He's very handsome and has bright, alert eyes. And it softened her to look into them, imagine him in a good, loving home. You're a good son.
They make it easy to be. How about your parents?
There's only my mother. We're estranged.
I'm sorry. Where is she?
We haven't communicated in several years.
Off limits, Brooks deduced. Way off limits. I end up communicating with my parents damn near every day. One of the ups, or downs, depending on your viewpoint, of living in a small town.
I think in your case it must be an advantage and a comfort.
Yeah, I took it for granted when I was growing up, but that's what kids do, take for granted. When I lived in Little Rock, I talked or emailed a lot, and I came up every month or so to see them, my sisters, my friends who still live here. But I never thought about moving back.
You were happy in Little Rock, and with your work there.
Yeah, I was. But when my father got sick, I not only felt I had to come back, I realized I wanted to.
He pointed a finger at her.
Fated.
She gave that little headshake and smile he was growing very fond of. You have a close nuclear family.
You could say that. How's the pizza?
It's very good. When I make my own, I make a whole wheat crust, but I like this better.
Make your own? Like, from a box?
If it's in a box, it's not making your own.
Most everything I make's out of a box. You make pizza from scratch?
Yes, when I want it.
Even my mother doesn't do that.
He put another slice on her plate, one on his, then topped off their wine.
Maybe you'll show me the greenhouse later.
I'm not growing marijuana. He laughed, so quick, so delighted, it made her jump a little.
Wouldn't that be interesting? But it's not what I was thinking. I grew up with gardeners, so I'm interested. Not to say we don't have a few around these parts growing some weed for personal use or as a second income. My own mother did until she started having kids, and she'd still argue at the blink of an eye for legalizing it.
Legalizing, inspecting, and taxing marijuana would eliminate the funds spent on the attempt to enforce the current laws and generate considerable revenue.
There's that viewpoint thing again.
The dog shifted, sat up, stared at Abigail. "Allez," she said, and he climbed off the porch, headed for a tree.
Back to French. Did that dog just ask permission to pee?
He wouldn't leave the porch without my permission. She shifted herself, took a sip of wine. "I've reconsidered."
Too late. You're already into your second slice.
"Not the pizza. I've reconsidered having sex with you." He was grateful he'd just swallowed, or he'd have choked.
Is that a fact?
"Yes. After weighing the pros and cons, I've decided sex with you would be mutually satisfying. You're attractive and pleasant, and clean. You kiss very well, and while I've found that's not always a reliable gauge for skill in bed, it often follows. If you're agreeable, we can finish dinner, I'll show you the greenhouse, then we can go in and have sex. I'm on birth control, but I would require you wear a condom." He was damn near speechless.
That's an offer, all right.
"You don't accept?" She hadn't factored in a refusal. "I thought you wanted me physically. You don't?" He put his plate down, got to his feet. Too wound up to give a damn what the dog thought or did, Brooks pulled Abigail up, gave her a good hard yank against him. No soft kiss this time, no easy exploration. This exploded, fire-bombing shrapnel through her senses. Her balance swayed, crumbled. She had to cling to him or fall. Wait. Perhaps it was the tremble in her voice, or the low, warning growl from the dog, but though he didn't let her go, he eased up. Ami. Her hand trembled like her voice as she laid it briefly on Brooks' cheek. Then she added a hand signal for the dog. Ami, Bert. Pillow. When the dog sat, Abigail let out a shaky breath. "He thought you were hurting me."
Was I?
"No, but I'd like to sit down."
Look at me.
She took that breath again, then lifted her gaze to his. "You're angry."
No, I'm not. I'm not sure what I am, but I'm not mad.
"You don't want me."
Do I have to answer that question again? And if so, will I need an ambulance when your dog gets done with me?
Oh. He heard the humiliation in the sound as she closed her eyes and nodded. "I understand. I was too blunt, too matter-of-fact. I should have waited for you to approach the subject, or, failing that, I shouldn't have been so calculating. I'd really like to sit down." He let her go, sat beside her.
First, I've got nothing but good feelings about the idea you're willing to go to bed with me. The problem, on my side, is having the feeling you're handling it like a chore you want to cross off your to-do list. Exactly true, she thought, in delivery and intent. "I'm sorry. I thought it was the right approach. You're not angry, but you're at least a little insulted. I am sorry." She gathered enough courage to look at him. "I know approach matters to some people. I know that. This was as poorly presented and demeaning as the woman in Ozark Art." I wouldn't go that far, and I hoped you'd reconsider at some point.
"I wasn't going to, then. I was nervous, and I mishandled it."
Nervous?
This isn't how I usually... I don't know how to explain.
Not without telling me more than you want to. All right, let's try this. We'll finish this glass of wine, and you'll show me the greenhouse. We'll see how things go from there."
"I'm not good with seeing how things go."
"I'm real good at it. Let's give it a try. If you don't like how they go, we can always do things your way. I figure I can't lose."
"You mean you'd have sex either way?" He laughed again, reached out and took her hand for a squeeze.
"What a woman. Let's just see. Damn it."
He broke off when his cell phone rang.
"Hold that thought. Yeah, Ash, what's the problem?"
She saw his face change as he listened, saw it go quiet and a little hard.
"No, you did right. I'm on my way. You wait, you hear? Wait until I get there."
"I'm sorry," he said to Abigail as he closed the phone. "It's all right." But she didn't look at him as she rose to pick up the plates.
"This kind of thing is part of the package,"
he began. "I understand that, of course. But you're off duty."
"So I must be using it as an excuse?" "No."
Gently, he laid a hand on her arm.
"No, Abigail, this particular problem is one I ordered whoever got the call on it, which was inevitable, to contact me, on or off duty. I need to handle the situation."
"I see. I do understand."
"I'd like to come back."
"You don't have to feel—"
"Abigail, I'd like to come back, if I can. If I can't, I'll call you. I'm not sure which it's going to be."
"Because you have to see how it goes."
"That's exactly right. I have to go."
He leaned down, kissed her.
"I'd rather stay."
She believed him, and the belief warmed something inside her as he strode off the porch and around the house toward his car. So tonight, the job sucked, Brooks thought, as he drove toward Tyball and Missy Cruz. But he'd given this situation considerable thought since the last time Ty had drunk himself mean. Tonight, one way or another, Brooks intended to fix it. Every window in the Cruz house glowed up like Christmas, while neighbors gathered on the lawns as if the domestic disturbance qualified as a party. Ash kept them back from the house where bluegrass blasted through the wide-open door and the occasional crash rang out. As Brooks got out of his car, Jill Harris, house on the left, walked over. "Somebody's got to go in there before he wrecks what's left of that place."
"Is Missy in there?"
"She ran out, barefoot, crying, her mouth bleeding. I can't keep making these calls if nothing's going to be done about it."
"Will you file a complaint?"
"I have to live next door." At 5'0", Jill folded her arms across her pink cardigan. "I tried talking to Missy about it once, while she sat in my kitchen holding a bag of my frozen peas to her black eye. She ended up calling me a dried-up old bitch who couldn't mind her own business. Now she doesn't speak to me. You think I want him banging on my door one drunken night?"
"All right, Miss Harris. Come on, Ash. Do you want to send someone out to find Missy?" "No, she's around here somewhere, or she hightailed it over to her sister's. She knows we'll respond."
Part of him wondered if she'd come to enjoy the drama of it all, and he didn't like the wondering.
"She'll wait for us to haul him off," Brooks continued. "Then she'll come back home, wait till morning to come tell us she slipped on the soap or some shit. I want you to stand by, but don't talk to him. I don't want you to say anything." "I can do that."
Brooks didn't have to knock, as Missy had left the door wide open when she fled. He stayed on the stoop, called out.
"I don't know as he can hear," Ash began. "He'll hear. We're not going inside. We're staying out here where we've got better than a dozen witnesses." "To what?" "To what happens next." "Ty, you got company at the door." "I'm busy."
Brooks watched a lamp fly across the living room.
"I'm redecorating." "I see that. Need a minute of your time." "Come on in then. Join the fucking party." I come in there, I'm hauling you to jail. If you come out here, we'll just have us a conversation. Christ's sake, can't a man get some chores done in his own home? Ty stumbled to the door, big, glassy-eyed, blood pockmarking his face where Brooks assumed flying glass had nicked it. Hey there, Ash. Now, what can I do for you officers of the goddamn law tonight? Looks like you've been sucking down that rebel yell pretty hard, Brooks said, before Ash forgot himself and responded. No law against it. I'm in my own home, sweet fucking home. I ain't driving. I ain't operating heavy machinery. He cracked himself up, had to bend over and wheeze as the laugh took his breath away. Where's Missy? Hell if I know. I come home. There's no supper on the table. But she had time to whine, nag, where I been, what I been doing, and who I'm doing it with. Is that when you hit her? The glassy eyes went sly. You know how clumsy she is, and when she's on the whining and nagging, she can't see straight. Stupid bitch walked right into a door. Then she takes off. He gestured, spotted the neighbors. Bunch of assholes got nothing better to do than stand around outside. I'm in my house. Ty pointed to his own feet to prove a point. Redecorating. That is correct. Maybe if you spent less time redecorating and more time fucking your wife, she wouldn't walk into walls and take off. I'm gonna get me some paint and... What'd you say? You heard me. Beside him, Ash goggled, but Brooks kept his eyes trained on Tybal. I guess you can't get that pea shooter you call a dick up anymore. Ty swayed back and forth on his size 14 boots, blinked his bloodshot eyes. You better shut your fucking mouth. Then again, when you're equipped with a cock the size of a gherkin, what's the point in trying to get some wood? Get off my property, you fucker! Ty shoved him, and that was enough, but Brooks wanted to nail it shut. That the best you got? Brooks put a sneer on his face. I guess it figures a dickless wonder does the pushy shove like a girl. Next thing you'll be pulling my hair and crying. Though he was prepared for the punch and Ty was teetering drunk, it still carried some weight. Brooks tasted blood as Ash let out a wondrous, Jesus Christ, beside him. And on a roar, Ty charged. Brooks sidestepped, turned his foot just enough that Ty tripped over it and went flying into the yard. Now you've done it. You're under arrest for assaulting an officer. I'll kill you! Scrambling to his feet, Ty came at Brooks, fists flying. Add resisting arrest. Brooks dodged or blocked most of the blows. You want to give me a hand securing the prisoner, Ash? Yes, sir. Breaking out of his open-mouthed shock, Ash ran forward. You keep your hands off me, you pissant cocksucker! He swung at Ash, went wide but connected with his shoulder. That'll be a second count of assaulting an officer. I think it's clear we'll be throwing drunk and disorderly into the mix. Between the two of them, they got Ty down on the ground, cuffed him. As they hauled a struggling, cursing Ty up, Brooks scanned the faces on neighboring lawns. I'm sending a deputy out shortly, he said, raising his voice. He'll get statements from y'all. I don't want any bullshit, you hear? You say what you saw. Anybody doesn't, I'm charging with obstruction of justice. Don't test me. He put a hand on Ty's head, boosted him into the back of the cruiser, then swiped the back of his hand over his bloody lip. Deputy Heiderman, you follow me in. Yes, sir, Chief. He ignored Ty's rantings as he drove to the station, did his best to ignore his aching jaw as well.
The warning look he shot Ash had the deputy keeping his mouth shut as they loaded Ty into a cell. "I want a lawyer. I'm suing your ass, then I'm kicking it for saying that shit."
"What shit?" Brooks locked the cell door.
"That shit about I ain't got no dick and I can't get it up to do Missy, you fucker."
"Damn, Ty, you must be drunker than you look. I haven't seen your dick since the showers in high school PE, and I can't say I paid it much mind then. I never said anything about it."
"You lying sack. You said it was the size of something small."
"You're drunk. You had the music blasting. You don't know what you heard. Deputy, did I say anything to impinge the prisoner's manhood?" I didn't hear anything. I'm going to have Deputy Fitzwater go out and take statements from the witnesses. Here's what's going to happen now, Ty, and this time you should listen good. You can get a lawyer, all right. You'll need one. I'm filing charges for assault, for resisting, for D&D, and for creating a goddamn public nuisance. You're going to jail, and not just overnight. Not this time.
Bullshit.
Assault on a police officer, that's a felony, Ty. You got 2 counts, plus the resisting. You could do 5 years.
His rage-red face went white. Bullshit.
And the words shook. You think about that. A lawyer might get that down to, 18 months in with probation, but you'll do real time for it. That's a promise.
You can't send me to jail. I've got to make a living.
What you've been doing the last couple years, I don't call it living.
He thought of Tyball out in center field, fast on his feet, an arm like a rocket, of Ty and Missy shining all through high school, and told himself what he'd done, what he would do, was for that bright, shiny couple.
You think about that tonight, Ty. Think about spending the next year or 2 or more down in Little Rock, or the chance I might give you of spending that time on probation, contingent on attendance and completion of alcohol rehabilitation, anger management, and marriage counseling.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Ty dropped down on the bunk, putting his head in his hands.
I feel sick.
You are sick. You think about it.
Brooks stepped back, secured the door to the cells.
You baited him. What are you talking about, Ash? Come on, Chief. He can't hear us out here. You baited him into the assault. Ash, I'm going to say this once. Sooner or later, it wasn't just going to be Missy with a split lip or black eye. The neighbors, they'd get tired of calling us in. Maybe one of them would get it into his head to stop it himself. Or Missy would get tired of getting smacked and pick up one of the guns they've got in that house. Or he'd get tired of having her run out and hit her hard enough she couldn't run anymore. He never broke up the place like he was doing tonight. No, he's escalating. I don't want to get called out there to deal with one or both of their bodies. Can you do like you said? Make him go to rehab and stuff? Yeah, I'm going to make sure of it. Officially, what you heard me say to him tonight was the same you've heard me say before. Did he hit Missy? Where was she? What was the problem? And so on. You got that? I got it. All right, then. I'm going to write it up. Have Boyd go on out there to get those witness statements and check to make sure Missy's back home. She'll come in tomorrow, like always. Yeah, she would, Brooks thought, but this time she'd have to make a different choice. And I'll deal with her. You can go on home. No, sir, I'll stay here tonight. You caught it last time. I'll stay. You should ice down that jaw. You took a pretty good shot. In the morning, maybe you could bring in some of those sticky buns from the bakery. I can do that. Fancy coffee, too? They got that one with the chocolate in it and the whipped cream on top. I know the one. How's that shoulder? It's not bad. Probably bruise up some, but that's more weight on it. Tyball's okay when he's not drinking. Maybe, if what you did sticks, he'll be okay.
It took longer than he'd hoped, but Abigail's lights were still on when he got back to her house. The 4 Motrin he'd swallowed took the throbbing in his jaw down to an annoying ache. That would have been good, but the lessening there made him aware of the few other spots Ty had landed a fist or a boot. Should just go home, he told himself as he eased out of the car. He should go home, take an hour-long hot shower, drink 2 fingers of whiskey, and go to bed. The whole business with Ty had ruined his mood anyway. He'd just ask her for a rain check since he'd driven out here. She opened the door before he knocked, stood there in that braced and ready way of hers, studying his face. What happened?
Long story.
You need an ice pack, she said as she stepped back. The first time, he thought, she'd let him in without asking or maneuvering. He went in.
It took a while, sorry.
I did some work. She and the dog turned, walked back to the kitchen. She opened the freezer, got out an instant cold compress, and offered it.
People usually go for the frozen peas.
These are more efficient and less wasteful. He sat, laid it against his jaw.
Get punched in the face often?
No. Do you?
It's been a while. I forgot how much it fucking hurts. You wouldn't have any whiskey handy, would you?
Saying nothing, she turned to a cupboard. She took out a bottle of Jameson, and right there he wanted to kiss her feet, and poured him 2 fingers in a thick, lowball glass.
Thanks.
The first slow sip eased the rawness in his mood.
Anything you don't have handy?
Things I don't feel I have any use for.
There you go.
Do you want to tell me the long story?
Honey, I'm from the Ozarks. Long stories are a way of life.
All right. She got out a second glass, poured more whiskey, and sat.
God, you're a restful woman.
Not really.
Right now you are, and I sure need it.
He sat back, ignoring twinges, and took a slow sip of whiskey.
So, Tyball and Missy. Back in our high school days, they were the golden couple, you know what I'm saying?
They were important in that culture.
King and queen. He was the all-star athlete, quarterback with magic hands, center fielder with a bullet arm. She was head cheerleader, pretty as a strawberry parfait. He went to Arkansas State, mostly on an athletic scholarship, and she went along. From what I hear, they sparkled pretty good there, too. Up until junior year, when he messed up his knee on a play. All the talk of him going pro, that blew up. Ended up coming back home. They broke up, got back together, broke up, that sort of thing. Then they got married.
He sipped more whiskey. Between that, the Motrin, and the restfulness of the woman, he felt better.
He coached high school football a while, but it didn't go well. He didn't have the wiring for it, I guess. So he went to work in construction. Missy, she tried some modeling, but that didn't work out. She works at the flower pot. They never prepared, I'm thinking, for things not to keep on sparkling, so dealing with the dull took a toll. Ty, he started paying that toll with rebel yell.
He yells?
No, honey, it's a whiskey, not nearly as nice as what you poured me. My predecessor in this job let me know about the problem. The DUIs, the bar fights, and the D&Ds. That's
domestic disputes. He becomes violent and abusive when he drinks.
That's right. The last year or so, it's been worse.
Why hasn't he been arrested?
He has been. Then he ends up with a warning or community service. Missy won't press charges when he smacks her around and denies it ever happened. She fell, she slipped, she walked into a door.
She enables him.
That she does. And the fact is, people gave them a blind eye on the trouble. The kind of shine they had lasts a long time in a small town like this. But I spent some time away, so maybe I see it, them, differently. Since repeated attempts at getting them into therapy, rehab, counseling have failed, I went another way.
That resulted in your injury?
You could say. When my deputy called to report, they were at it, which means Ty came home drunk, hit her, she ran out. I got Ty to come out on his stoop in full view of the 14 people outside to watch the show. He had music blasting to accompany his wrecking of every breakable in the house he could get his hands on. This was a plus, as nobody but Ty and my deputy could hear me incite this drunken asshole to violence by questioning the size and virility of his penis. If that hadn't worked, I was prepared to suggest that his long-suffering and idiotic wife might find the size and virility of my penis more to her liking.
On a long breath, he shook his head.
I'm glad it didn't come to that. He punched me in the face in front of witnesses and is now contemplating serving time for a felony or 2.
That was a very good strategy. Men are sensitive about their genitalia. He choked a little on the whiskey, then rubbed his hand over his face on a laugh.
God knows we are.
Then he sobered, took a small sip.
God knows we are that.
Your method wasn't conventional, but the result was good. But you feel sorry and a little sad. Why?
He was a friend once. Not best, not close to best, but a friend of mine. I liked them, and I guess I liked seeing that sparkle too. I'm sorry to see them brought low like this. I'm sorry to be a part of bringing them low.
You're wrong. It'll be up to them to address and seek help for their problems, but as long as they were both unable to do that, they'd never resolve those problems. What you did gives him only 2 choices, jail or help. It's more likely that when sober and faced with those choices and consequences, he'll choose help. As she appears to be codependent, so will she. I would think your actions fall well within the function and spirit of your job description, as well as within the parameters of friendship. He set the whiskey he hadn't finished aside.
I was telling myself I should just go home with my mood and my aches and annoyances. I'm awfully glad I didn't.
He reached out, took her hands.
Let me take you to bed, Abigail.
She kept her eyes on his. All right. Chapter 13. All right. He wondered that he should find it so sweet, so disarming. She kept it just that simple. All right. He rose, drew her to her feet.
Maybe you could show me the way.
You mean to the bedroom?
Yeah. I know my way around what we'll be doing there.
The smile flickered in her eyes, around her mouth. I'd be disappointed if that wasn't true. He kept her hand as they walked back to the living room, up the stairs.
Considering what we'll be doing, and I hope you don't question my size and virility for the question, but how does Bert handle the process?
He's very well trained, so theoretically he won't interfere.
Brooks glanced back at the dog. Theoretically is a tricky word. And by interfere, do you mean he won't rip my throat out?
He shouldn't. At the door to the bedroom, Brooks turned her around, narrowed his eyes as he studied her.
I'm trying to figure out if you're being funny.
Humor can smooth over awkwardness, if there is any. I can't tell. But if Bert thought you hurt me or tried to, his first response would be to protect me, to stop you. He's seen you touch me, and I've instructed him you're a friend and to stand down. He sees I've brought you up here without duress, that I touch you." She laid a hand on Brooks's chest, then glanced at the dog, gave him an order.
"What language was that?"
Brooks asked when the dog walked over to a generous dog bed, circled 3 times, and laid down with a windy sigh. "Farsi."
"Seriously? You and Bert speak Farsi?"
"Not very well, but I'm working on it. I told him to rest. I don't want to put him out of the room. He wouldn't understand."
"Okay. Is that a stuffed bear in his bed?"
"Dogs are pack animals."
"Uh-huh. And a stuffed teddy bear is Bert's pack?"
"It comforts him." "I'd like to turn down the bed."
"I'll give you a hand."
"No, I have my
own way. Fine."
He wandered over, studied the computer station set up very like the one on the first floor. "It makes you wonder." She folded the simple duvet onto the padded bench at the foot of the bed. "I'm in the business. I believe strongly in security and feel a separate obligation to use and test products and systems."
"I think that's true, but that's not all."
He turned around, watched with appreciation when she took a condom from the nightstand drawer and set it on the table by the bed.
"And we don't need to talk about it now. Is it okay if I put my weapon on the desk here?"
"Yes. Should I undress?"
"No. I have my own way."
After he took off his gun, set it down, he crossed to her, trailed a hand down her hair, her cheek, her shoulder.
"I like finding out for myself what's under there."
He kissed her, testing, teasing, his fingers still skimming, over her face, down her side, up her back, light and easy as he could feel her holding back, holding in. "You have good hands."
"I haven't put them to much use where you're concerned yet."
"But you will." "I'd like to see," she said as she began to unbutton his shirt. "You don't wear a uniform like your deputies."
"I got out of the habit. Didn't much feel like picking it up again."
"I like that you don't. You wear your authority in a different way." She parted his shirt, spread her hands over his chest. "You're in very good shape."
"Thanks."
And lifted her eyes to his. "So am I."
"I've noticed."
"I'm very strong for my build and have exceptional endurance."
"You're the sexiest thing in the strangest ways."
He peeled her shirt up and away. Shh." He laid his lips on hers as he boosted her onto the bed. The dog didn't make a sound, but Brooks could feel the guarded stare boring into his back as he lowered himself to Abigail. Her skin was soft, warm and smooth, the muscles of her arms, her shoulders taut. And though her mouth met and answered his avidly, those eyes stayed as watchful as her dog's.
"Close your eyes,"
he murmured, nibbling his way to her throat and back. "I like to see," she repeated.
"Close your eyes for a minute and just feel."
He waited until she did, then closed his own, then let himself sink just a little deeper. She felt. Nerve endings, pressure points, textures, all the more erotic with her eyes closed. A kind of trade-off for control. She was safe, she reminded herself. She was capable. And she needed.
"Don't think."
He skimmed his teeth over her jaw.
"Just feel."
She wasn't sure she knew how not to think, but she kept her silence since he seemed to prefer it, tried to let her mind relax. Different. Everything was different here, with him. She wanted to analyze why, but it was so pleasant to only experience. Just this once, she told herself. She softened under him just a little, just enough. He glided his lips along the subtle swell of her breast over the simple line of her bra, slid his tongue under the cotton, heard her breath catch. So he lingered there, stirring her while his hands roamed. She'd opened one of the windows part way so the night breeze fluttered through, carrying the scent of the woods, the steady music of the creek. Moonshine shimmered in hazy beams. He flipped open the button of her pants, eased them down a few inches, and felt the ridge of a tiny scar high on the blade of her hip. He took his time, wanted time to discover her, the angles and curves and dips, the simple clean scent of her skin, the way the muscles of her belly quivered when his lips brushed there. Her response was just as simple, the give, the touch, the fluid rise of her legs and hips as he continued to undress her. And then she erupted under him, jackknifing up, a whip of those long, firm legs, a twist of that compact body, and she was over him. Her mouth clamped down on his, ripped his dreamy languor to shreds and scorched the shreds to ashes. Her breath came on a tear as she scraped her teeth over his shoulder, slithered down, lithe and lethal as a snake, to nip at his chest, while her hands tugged at his belt. He levered up to drag her mouth back to his, to feed on the heat that radiated from her, urgent now, urgent and hungry. She arched back, limber as a bowstring, and pressed his face to her breast. "I need." He heard her moan it as she straddled him and rocked until he dug his fingers into her hips to keep from imploding. "I need." She was a madness of drive and movement. Caught in the storm of her, he let himself be blown, be battered, as they ravaged each other. Too much, but not enough, she thought frantically, as all those needs clawed and bit. She had to take, had to have, before this terrible pleasure broke her to pieces. His body so strong, so tough, incited so many wants, his mouth and hands so many sensations. He could take her to that moment of relief and release. Desperate, she grabbed the condom, ripped it open. "Let me," she whispered, stunned that her hands weren't quite steady as she covered him. She rose over him. In the soft bedroom light, he could see the intensity of her eyes, the glow of her skin. Then she took him in. For one breathless moment, everything stopped. Sight, sound, movement. Those fierce eyes stayed locked on his as their bodies joined. He thought, eye of the storm. Then she swept him away. She rode him as if her life hung in the balance, with urgent, focused speed. He raced with her, beat for crazed beat, with his heart drumming those frenzied strokes. When she broke on a half-sob, half-cry, those fascinating eyes closed, that dazzling body bowed, as her arms lifted to wrap around her head in a picture of utter, wanton pleasure. Those eyes sprang open again when he yanked her down, rolled her under him. Her mouth yielded, soft and swollen when he captured it. Then he swallowed her quick, surprised cry as he thrust into her. Now he rode, driving her up again, pleasing himself ruthlessly as she quaked, as she clung. He felt the orgasm rip through her, felt her nails bite into his back, and let his own release rend him to tatters. It took him a moment, or two, to realize he'd collapsed on her, his breath whooping out like a marathon runner's after a dive across the finish line. He rolled off, sprawled out on his back, hoping if he ended up having a heart attack, she had it in her to do the CPR. He managed one raw and reverent, "Wow." Glancing over, he saw Bert had remained in his bed, but stood and stared. "I don't know.
if your dog's curious or just plain jealous, but you might want to let him know you're okay."
She gave Bert the command for rest. While he settled down, he kept his eyes on the bed.
"Are you okay?"
Brooks asked when she said nothing more. "Yes. It's been several months since I had sex. I realized I rushed you."
"From my point of view, I think we timed it just right. Jesus, you've got some body there, Abigail. About as perfect as they come."
"I like yours very much. It's very well proportioned, with excellent muscle tone." That just tickled the hell right out of him, so he shifted over to give her a kiss. His grin faded as he looked in those eyes. A man who'd grown up with a mother and 2 sisters knew when female tears were just below the surface.
"What's wrong?"
"Nothing. The sex was excellent. Thank you."
"Jesus Christ, Abigail."
"I'm thirsty," she said quickly. "Do you want some water?" He laid a hand on her arm as she began to roll out of bed.
"Abigail."
"I need a moment and some water." She walked out without putting a stitch on. That surprised him, as he'd pegged her as the shy type in that area. Then again, the woman was a puzzle through and through.
"You know the secrets," he said to Bert. "Too bad you can't talk."
Though she had water stored on the 2nd floor, she walked down to the kitchen. She did need that moment. She understood that sex and the immediate aftermath comprised a very vulnerable time for body and mind. She'd prided herself on being able to fully participate and recover her control and faculties quickly. Immediately, really. Why was she shaken, and she wasn't entirely sure what she was experiencing. It might have been because she knew him on a more personal level than the others she'd chosen as bedmates, but all she could be certain of was the experience had been unlike anything she'd known. Why did it make her weepy? If she'd been alone, she would have curled up in bed and cried this inexplicable feeling away. She wasn't being rational or smart. The sex had been very, very good. He'd enjoyed it, too. She liked his company, and maybe that was part of the worry. But she was so damned tired of the worry. "Just something I do," she murmured, and got 2 bottles of cold water from the refrigerator. She gnawed on it all the way back upstairs, where Brooks sat propped up in her bed, watching her. "I don't know how to behave." She blurted it out, there, and handed him a bottle of water.
"Is there some standard you're reaching for?"
"Normal."
"Normal?"
He nodded, twisted off the cap, took a couple deep gulps.
"Okay, I can help with that. Get back in bed."
"I'd like to have sex with you again, but—"
"Do you want me to show you normal?"
"Yes."
"Then get back in bed."
"All right." She laid down beside him, tried not to stiffen when he pulled her to him. But instead of initiating sex, he tucked her in so her head rested on his shoulder and her body curled toward his.
"This is pretty normal, according to my standards. Or would be if you'd relax."
"It's nice." She read books, she watched movies, she knew this sort of arrangement took place, but she'd never tried it before, never wanted to. "It's comfortable, and your body's warm."
"After the heat we generated, I don't think I'll cool off until I'm dead a week."
"That's a joke, and a compliment." She tipped her head up to look at him, smiled. "So, ha, thank you."
"There you go, being funny again."
Taking her hand, he laid it on his heart.
"And when I'm too weak to laugh, you turned me inside out, Abigail." "That's another compliment,"
he added when she didn't respond. I need to think of one for you.
Well, if you've got to think about it.
I didn't mean... She looked up again, stricken, then caught that gleam in his eyes. You were teasing me.
See, this is the part, on my scale of normal, where we tell each other how amazing we were. You especially tell me.
Because a man's ego is often correlated with his sexual prowess.
That's one way of putting it. Things like, you saw God or the earth moved are cliches for a reason.
The earth is in constant motion, so it's not a good compliment. A better one would be the earth stopped moving, even though that would be impossible and a disaster if it were possible.
I'll still take it as a compliment.
His hand stroked up and down her back, the way she sometimes stroked Bert. No wonder the dog loved it. Her heartbeat slowed to the rhythm, and everything inside her uncoiled. Normal, she thought, was as lovely as she'd always imagined.
Tell me one thing, he said, just one thing about you. It doesn't have to be important, he added when she tensed. It doesn't have to be a secret. Just anything. It could be your favorite color.
I don't have one because there are too many, unless you mean primary colors.
Okay, color's too complicated. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? I'll go first. I wanted to be Wolverine.
You wanted to be a Wolverine? That's very strange.
Not a Wolverine. Wolverine. X-Man.
Oh, I know who that is. The mutant superhero from the graphic novels and movies.
That's the one.
But how could you be him when he already existed and his existence is fictional?
I was 10, Abigail.
Oh.
How about you?
I was supposed to be a doctor.
Supposed to be?
He waited a moment.
You didn't want to be a doctor?
No.
Then you didn't answer the question. What did you want to be?
I was supposed to be a doctor and thought I'd have to be, so when I was 10, I didn't think about being anything else. It's not a good answer. Yours was better.
It's not a competition. Anyway, you can be Storm. She's hot.
Halle Berry's character from the movies. She's very beautiful. She controls the weather. But Wolverine doesn't have sex with her. He has feelings for Jane, the doctor, and she in turn is torn between her feelings for Cyclops and Wolverine.
You know your X-Men relationship dynamics.
I saw the movie.
How many times?
Once, several years ago. It was interesting that Wolverine doesn't remember his past, and his reluctant protective instincts for the girl Rogue added dimension. He's a good character for a young boy to emulate. The writers seeded a difficult field for Rogue, as her mutation makes it impossible for her to safely touch another person, skin to skin. The scene with her boyfriend in the beginning was very sad.
You remember a lot of the details for seeing it once.
I have an eidetic memory. I sometimes read books or watch movies a second or third time, but not because I don't remember them. He shifted to look down at her.
There, you told me something. So you keep everything stored up here.
He tapped her temple.
Why isn't your head a lot bigger?
She laughed, then stopped, uncertain. That was a joke?
Yeah.
He brushed the hair away from her cheek, touched his lips there.
Have you ever made pancakes?
Yes.
Good, because you'd remember how to make them.
You're hungry? You want pancakes?
In the morning.
He glided his hands up her body, in, grazing her nipples with his thumbs. You want to stay here? Sleep here tonight?
How else am I going to get those pancakes you're making me?
I don't sleep with people. I've never slept with a man overnight. His hands hesitated for a fraction of a second, then continued their glide.
Then you don't know if you snore.
I don't snore.
I'll let you know.
There were so many reasons why she shouldn't allow it. But he was kissing her again, touching her again, stirring her again. She'd tell him no. After. She woke just before dawn, lay very still. She could hear him breathing, slow, steady, a different, softer sound than Bert. Bert did snore. A little. She'd fallen asleep, actually fallen to sleep after they'd had sex a second time. She hadn't told him to go, and she'd intended to. She hadn't made her last check of the house and the monitors. She hadn't put her weapon on the nightstand beside her. She'd just gotten into that comfortable, normal position and somehow slipped into sleep while he talked to her. Not only rude, she decided, but frightening. How could she have let her guard down so completely with him? With anyone? What did she do now? She had a routine, and one that didn't include an overnight guest. She had to let Bert out, feed him, check the monitors, her business email and texts. What did she do now? She supposed she'd make pancakes. When she eased out of bed, the dog's breathing changed. She saw his eyes open in the half-light and his tail give its customary morning thump. She whispered the command for outside in German as she retrieved her robe, and Bert stretched. Together they padded quietly out of the room and downstairs. When the door closed, Brooks opened his eyes, smiled. He should have figured her for an early riser. Himself, he wouldn't have minded another hour, but considering the big picture, he could push himself out of bed. And maybe he could talk her back into it once she'd let the dog out to do his morning thing. He rolled out, headed for the bathroom. On cue, the minute he emptied his bladder, he thought about coffee. Then he rubbed his tongue over his teeth. He didn't feel right about poking around to see if she had a spare toothbrush, but he couldn't see the harm in digging out a squirt of toothpaste. He opened the drawer of the little vanity, saw the neatly rolled tube of Crest, and her cig. Who the hell kept a semi-auto in the drawer with the dental floss and toothpaste? A fully loaded one, he noted, when he checked. She'd told him one thing the night before, he reminded himself. He'd just have to persuade her to tell him more. He scrubbed Crest over his teeth with his finger, then went back for his pants. When he got downstairs, he smelled fresh coffee, heard the mutter of the morning news. She stood at the counter, stirring what he hoped was pancake batter in a dark blue bowl. "Mornin'." "Good morning. I made coffee." "I smelled it in my sleep. You don't snore." "I told you She broke off when his lips met hers. "Just verifying," he said as he picked up one of the mugs she'd set out. "I borrowed a squirt of toothpaste." He poured his coffee and hers, watched her gaze lift to his. "Do you want to tell me why you have a cig in your toothpaste drawer?" "No, I have a license." "I know, I checked. You have several licenses. Got sugar?" "Oh, yeah, right here." He dipped the spoon she'd put beside the mug in the sugar bowl, added 2 generous servings. "I could keep checking, this and that and the other. I'm good at digging. But I won't. I won't do any more checking unless I tell you so first." "You won't check as long as I have sex with you?" His eyes burned green with hints of molten gold as he lowered the mug. "Don't insult both of us. I won't check because I won't go behind your back, because we're whatever we are at this point. I'd like to sleep with you again, but that's not a condition. I want to keep seeing you because we enjoy each other. In and out of bed, is that accurate?" "Yes." "I don't like to lie. Not that I haven't and won't in the line. But outside the job, I don't lie. I won't lie to you, Abigail, and checking on you without you knowing seems like kin to a lie." Why should I believe you?
That's up to you. All I can do is tell you. This is damn good coffee, and not just because I didn't have to make it myself. Pancakes.
Yes.
Now you look even prettier than you did 10 seconds ago. Am I going to find another gun when I get out dishes and such to set the table?
Yes.
You're the most interesting woman of my acquaintance.
He opened the cupboard where he'd seen her take out plates for pizza. I thought you'd just stop.
Stop what?
Once we had sex, I thought you'd stop wanting to be here. Stop wondering. He opened the drawer for flatware, noted the Glock.
You might have forgotten, but the earth stopped moving.
He set out the flatware as she ladled batter onto her griddle.
It's not just sex, Abigail. It'd be easier if it were, but there's something. I don't know what the hell it is yet, but there's something. So, we ride it out, see what happens.
I don't know how to do that. I told you. He picked up his coffee again, stepped over to kiss her on the cheek.
It looks to me like you're doing it just fine. Where's the syrup?
Abigail. What is character but the determination of incident? What is incident but the illustration of character? Henry James. Chapter 14. Waking up with Brooks, making breakfast, simply dealing with the jolt in her routine, threw Abigail off schedule. He'd taken his time with breakfast. He always seemed to have something to talk about, and keeping up jumbled her thoughts out of order. By the time he'd left, she was more than an hour behind on her plans for the day, not to mention the time she'd lost the night before. Now, instead of arriving at the market as soon as it opened, she needed to complete her research and documentation of the Volkovs' Chicago to Atlantic City money laundering operation. If she didn't get the data to her FBI connection within the next 2 days, they'd miss the month's major delivery. These things took time, she thought, as she settled down to work. Time to gather, to decrypt, to correlate, to send. Her information had to be pure and absolutely accurate. And maybe this time something would stick to Ilya. Maybe this time he'd pay. Or, at least, as before, she'd have caused him trouble, frustration, money, and men. In her fantasies, her work brought the Volkovs to ruin, exposed them, stripped them clean. Korotky, Ilya, all of them spent the rest of their lives in prison. Keegan and Cosgrove were discovered, disgraced, and convicted. And when she let those fantasies spin out, somehow they all knew she was responsible for making them pay. Still, it wasn't enough. Julie would always be dead at 18. John and Terry would always be murdered trying to keep her safe. It was better to be realistic and to do what she could whenever she could to chip away at their profits, their routines, their equilibrium. She worked until afternoon before she was satisfied. Better to step away for an hour or two, she decided, and come back fresh for a last check of the data before she sent it in. She'd do the marketing now, even though it was the wrong time of day. Just the wrong time. Then she'd come home, take Bird out for some exercise and training. Then she'd recheck the data, program her series of bounces to her contact's email. After that, she'd do some hard and sweaty training of her own, as she'd want that physical outlet after completing her task. With the evening free, she'd put a few hours into work on the virus she'd begun developing over the last 18 months. She changed her weapon, strapping on her more compact Glock, covered it with a hoodie. Soon the temperatures would rise too high for a jacket, and she'd have to use an ankle holster. As she checked and reset her alarm, let Bird out to put him on guard, she considered acquiring a new gun. She could treat herself to some weapon research that evening. The idea relaxed her, and she admitted she found it pleasant to drive into town in the afternoon sunlight, to watch the way that light played through the tender, unfurling leaves. She caught glimpses of the delicate drape of toothwort, the bold yellow of trout lily catching the dappled sun along the stream bank just before the water took a quick, tumbling fall over rocks. Among those tender green leaves, wild plum added color and drama. Everything seemed so fresh and new and hopeful. Spring revived, she thought, offered that new beginning of the cycle. It was her first full spring in this new place, this place she so much wanted to be her home. 12 years. Couldn't it be enough? Couldn't this be her place to stay? To plant her garden and tend it, watch it grow and harvest, to do her work, pay her debt, and just live. Why should they find her here, in these hills, in this quiet? How could they ever connect Abigail Lowry with that young girl who'd been so foolish, so careless, and such an easy target? As long as she stayed prepared, stayed vigilant, remained unexceptional, invisible, she could make a home and a life. Stay safe. As long as she stayed safe, she could continue to chip away at the Volkoffs and pay that debt. She liked the town so much, she thought, as she turned onto Shop Street. She loved the pretty streets and busy shops, the color sliding into it all with pots and barrels of sun-struck daffodils and candy-colored tulips. Tourists added more movement, strangers passing through. Some very likely returned, another holiday or short visit. But they came for the quiet, the landscape, the hiking, the local lore and crafts, not for nightclubs and urban action, the sort of entertainment that lured men like Ilya. Her confidence remained high that she'd never see him or anyone connected to him strolling along the streets here, fishing in the rivers, hiking in the hills. And surely, if anyone from the U.S. Marshals, the FBI, even the Chicago police visited here, she wouldn't be recognized. She was out of place and a dozen years older, her hair a different color and style. If they looked, they might see, but there was no reason to look for Elizabeth Fitch here in the pretty tourist town in the Ozarks. If the day came, she knew how to run, how to change, how to bury herself in another place. But it wouldn't be today, she promised herself as she parked near the market, and every day it wasn't today was a gift. She got out of the car, hit the key to lock it. Even as she heard the lock click into place, she saw Brooks crossing the street toward her. She didn't know what to do with the quick rise of her pulse, the little flutter of something in her belly. He even walked as if he had all the time in the world, she thought, and still managed to cover ground quickly. He stood beside her before she could decide what to do or say. This is either really good timing or really good luck. He took her hand, he was always touching her, and just covered her with his smile. I'm going to the market. Yeah, I figured. Take a walk with me first. You're just what I need. For what? In general, let's say. Rough morning, and I haven't shaken it all the way off. I need supplies. Got any appointments later? Appointments? People were looking at them. She could feel the glances on the back of her neck. No. Good. Let's walk down toward the park. I'm taking half an hour. You don't usually go shopping this late in the afternoon. I like mornings. But she'd have to mix it up more, she realized. Routines should never be noticed. Do anything interesting this morning? Somehow they were walking, and he still had her hand. What was she supposed to do about that? I'm sorry, what? This morning, did you do anything interesting? She thought of money laundering, Russian mobs, the FBI. Not particularly. Now, you ask if I did anything. Oh, all right. Did you?
I spent a lot of it being yelled at or lectured to, as expected. Missy came in to claim she'd tripped and wanted me to release Ty. She wasn't happy with the charges against him or the consequences of them. Now that he's sober, Ty's actually taken it better than she is. When Brooks lifted a hand in a wave to someone across the street, Abigail fought back a wince. This was not being invisible. After she finished yelling at me, Brooks continued, she did a lot of crying. When I let them talk to each other, they both did a lot of crying. After that, she hunted up and hauled in a lawyer, one who's been a pissant his entire life. That's where the lecturing came into my day. He seems to feel I'm exceeding my authority by offering the rehab and counseling in lieu of a trial and possible jail time.
It isn't within your authority to set a plea bargain.
You're both right, so I informed the pissant that was fine. Ty could stay put until we went before the judge, held a bail hearing, and so on, and how he could risk spending the next several years in jail. "How you doing, Miss Harris?" he called out to a tiny woman watering a tub of mixed bulbs outside Read More Books.
"I'm doing, Brooks. How about you?"
"Can't complain."
"Where was I?" he asked Abigail. She could feel the tiny woman's eyes on her as she continued down the sidewalk, hand in hand with Brooks. "You told the pissant lawyer Ty could risk spending the next several years in jail. I really need to—"
"That's right. So at that point, Missy and Ty started yelling at each other. Personally, I don't understand people who stay together when they've got so much animosity and contempt for each other they can call each other those kind of names. But Ty got worked up enough to turn it on me, vow to finish what he started last night, and kick my ass."
"It all sounds dramatic and distressing."
"Can't say otherwise. Ty's vow didn't please the pissant, as it made his claim of diminished capacity, or whatever the hell he was going for, break apart like rotten lumber under a hammer. He was less pleased yet when Ty reached through the bars and got a hand around his pissant throat. Hey, Calliope, those roses look mighty pretty."
A woman in a long, colorful skirt, a huge straw hat, and flowered gardening gloves waved from her yard. "I knew you were going to say that."
He laughed. "Elma's daughter. She's a psychic."
Abigail started to explain how doubtful it was that the lady with the gorgeous rose bushes had psychic ability, but Brooks was already continuing the story.
"I will admit my reflexes might have been just a tad slow pulling Ty off the pissant, due to all the yelling and lecturing."
Her head might have been spinning a little, but she followed well enough. "You let your prisoner choke his lawyer and found it satisfying, as you'd have liked to choke him yourself." Brooks gave her arm a swing and grinned at her.
"Though it doesn't reflect well on me, that's about the truth of it. The pissant quit then and there, and Ty's sentiments toward him, delivered at the top of his lungs as said pissant retreated, were suggestions of self-gratification I don't believe the pissant can manage. Missy ran out after the pissant, screaming and sobbing, and as a result of drama and distress, I'm taking half an hour with a pretty woman."
"I believe there are people who think the rules or the law shouldn't apply to their particular situation because they're poor or they're rich, they're sad or sick or sorry, or whatever justification most fits their individual makeup and circumstance."
"I can't argue with that."
"But the court system often gives credence to that attitude by making deals to those who've broken the rules and the law for just those reasons."
"I can't argue that either. But the law and the system have to breathe some."
"I don't understand."
"Law needs some room, some flexibility to consider the human factor, the circumstances."
At the toot-toot of a horn, he glanced toward the street, waved at a man with a huge black beard driving a rusty pickup.
"The man who steals a loaf of bread," Brooks continued without missing a beat, Because he's starving and desperate, shouldn't be treated the same as the one who steals it planning to sell it at a profit.
Perhaps, but if the law had more uniformity, those who steal for profit would have fewer opportunities to repeat the offense. He grinned down at her in a way that made her wonder if she'd said something charming or foolish.
Ever think about being a cop?
Not exactly. I really should go back and—
Brooks, bring that girl on over here.
With a jolt, Abigail swung around, stared at the house with the dragons and mermaids and fairies, and saw Brooks's mother climbing down a run of scaffolding. She wore paint-splattered bib overalls and paint-splattered sneakers. A bright red kerchief covered her hair. The minute her feet hit the ground, the puppy, who'd begun to yip and dance at her voice, leaped so high he executed a mid-air flip before he tumbled into a sprawl. The woman laughed, scooped him up as she unsnapped his lead.
"Come on," she called again. "Come on and introduce Abigail to your little brother."
Her favorite son right now, too, Brooks told Abigail. "Let's say hey. I really should get back to the market."
"Haven't I been yelled at and lectured to enough for one day?"
He sent Abigail a pitiful, pained look.
"Have some pity, will you?"
She couldn't be invisible if people noticed her, she thought, and it was worse if she made it obvious that she wanted to be invisible. Though she wished Brooks would let go of her hand, it seemed too intimate. She crossed the short distance to the yard of what she thought of as the magic house.
"I was hoping you'd drop by for a visit,"
Sunny said to Abigail.
"Actually, I talked her into a walk before she did her marketing."
"No point wasting a day like this indoors. Meet Plato."
"He's very handsome."
"And a rascal. I do love a rascal," Sunny said, nuzzling the puppy, then Brooks.
"He's smart, too." "Me or the dog?"
Sunny laughed, patted Brooks on the cheek.
"Both.
This one sits when he's told, but he won't stay put yet. Watch. Plato, now you sit." Sunny set the dog down, kept a hand on his rump as she dug in her pocket for a tiny dog treat with her free hand. "Sit now. There you go, a genius." She let the dog gobble the treat when his butt hit the grass. And he was up and jumping, wriggling 2 seconds later, then scrabbled his paws on Abigail's shins.
"We're working on manners."
"He's just a baby yet." Unable to resist, Abigail crouched down, smiling when Plato tried to crawl on her knees, laughing when he leaped and licked. "He has happy eyes." She closed his jaws gently when he tried to nip and chew. "None of that now." "Yes, you're very handsome and happy." As if overcome by the compliment, he flopped down, rolled over to expose his belly. "And he has good taste," Sunny remarked, as Abigail gave Plato a belly rub. "Both my boys do. You have happy eyes yourself today, Abigail." "I like dogs." But she looked at the house, shifted the focus. "Your house is so interesting and colorful. It must be rewarding to share your art with whoever passes by." "Keeps me off the streets and out of trouble. Mostly." "It's wonderful. I've enjoyed seeing what you've done and continue to do since I moved here. I like that it doesn't make sense." When Sunny laughed, Abigail felt the heat rise up the back of her neck. "I didn't say that correctly. I meant—" "I know exactly what you meant, and you're exactly right. I like that, too. Y'all come on in. I made some peach sun tea this morning, and I've got some of those ginger cookies with the lemon icing you like, Brooks."
"I could use a cookie."
Reaching down, he skimmed a hand over Abigail's hair. "Thank you very much, but I need to get to the market and home to my own dog." Abigail picked up the puppy as she rose, handing his wriggling body to Sunny. "It was nice to see you again, and to meet Plato." She moved as quickly as she could, trying to judge the line between busy and running away. They'd charmed her, seduced her, the man, the mother, even the little dog. She'd let herself be swept along. Conversation, invitations, pie, sex. People had seen her walking with Brooks, holding hands with him, talking to his mother. And people would talk about it. Her. Just because she wasn't part of a social network didn't mean she was oblivious to how it worked. She couldn't be the unexceptional, hardly noticed woman who lived on the fabric of Bickford if she became part of the fabric through Brooks. Why wasn't he behaving per the basic male profile? They'd had sex. He'd conquered. Now he should move on to the next challenge. When someone grabbed her arm, she reacted without thought. Pure instinct had her swinging around, leading with a back fist fired by waist and hip, the follow-through of jab already primed. Brooks slapped a hand on her fist a half-inch before it connected, had to brace, push back.
Whoa!
He managed, barely, to block the jab as well.
Excellent reflexes, Zena.
I'm sorry. The simple trip to the market took on the quality of a nightmare. You startled me.
At least. Fortunately, my reflexes are pretty good, otherwise I'd be sporting another bruise on my face.
I'm very sorry. She spoke stiffly now. You came up from behind and grabbed me.
Got it.
As if to soothe, he stroked a hand down her hair.
Baby, you're going to have to tell me who hurt you eventually.
Don't talk to me that way. This isn't going the way it's supposed to. You had sex.
I think that's we, and yeah. Why don't you clue me in on how it's supposed to go?
You're supposed to go away. Agitated, she pushed a hand through her hair, glanced around. I can't discuss this now. Here. I don't understand why it needs to be discussed. You're not supposed to be interested now.
For someone as smart as you are, you can be thick as a brick. I had sex with you because I'm interested, and since we slept together, I'm more interested.
Why? No, don't answer. You always have answers. You confuse me. I don't want to feel like this.
Like what?
I don't know. I need to go to the market, and I need to go home, and I need to finish my work, and...
You need to take a breath.
He laid his hands on her shoulders now.
Take a breath, Abigail.
I need to take a breath. She closed her eyes, fighting the panic attack. Oh, God, why hadn't she stayed home?
Good. Just take another breath. Take it easy. That's the way. Now, here's what we're going to do.
Don't tell me what we're going to do. There's not supposed to be any we.
Apparently there is. How about here's what I suggest we do. Why don't we go over to my office? You can sit down, have some water.
She shook her head. I have to go to the market.
Okay, you go on to the market. Later, should be around 6 or 6:30, I'll come out. I'll bring a couple of steaks and grill them up. We'll have some dinner, see if we can sort this out.
We don't need to have dinner or sort anything out. I just need to... Very gently, very quietly, he laid his lips on hers. When he lifted his head, her breath shuddered out.
I've got the sense that's what you don't want to feel. But you do, and I do. So we ought to sort it out.
You won't go away.
Let's see how it sorts out. If it comes down to that, I'll go away. I'm not going to hurt you, Abigail, and I'm going to do my best not to make you unhappy. But when two people feel something, they ought to respect that enough to try to figure it out.
You don't understand.
No, honey, I don't. But I want to. Let's get you to the market.
I don't want you to walk me back there. I want to be alone.
All right. I'll see you tonight.
One more conversation, she told herself as she hurried away. One more where she'd remain calm and rational. She'd simply explain that she wasn't interested in or inclined toward a relationship. Her work kept her too busy for the distractions of dinners and company and overnight guests. She would be firm. He would be sensible. They'd end whatever this was that should never have begun amicably. And everything would be quiet again. As soon as she got home, she'd practice what she'd say and how she'd say it. She'd be prepared. She put off the practice, reminding herself her priority was and would always be the work. Maybe compartmentalizing proved a little trickier than she expected, but she carefully reviewed all the data she'd gathered, made a few small adjustments, and composed her email. Information you may find useful. Thank you for your attention and any action deemed appropriate. Tvoj drug. Using the system she'd already devised for the message, she routed it through various locations, shut down the temporary account. As she often did, she thought she would have enjoyed communicating with her FBI contact, exchanging thoughts and opinions, but she had to settle for gleaning information from the occasional memo or file she hacked. After shutting down, she locked her copy of the data away. "We'll walk," she told Bert. "I'll practice what I need to say to Brooks while we do. Tomorrow, everything goes back to the way it should be. We have to work for a living, too, right?" As she pocketed her keys, Bert rubbed his body against her leg. "I met another dog today. He's very sweet. I think you'd like him." When she stepped outside, Bert fell in at her heels. "You'd like a friend. Next year, I'll get a puppy. You'll help me train him, and he'll be good company for both of us. That's all we need, isn't it? It's all we need." With Bert, she walked around to look at her young vegetable garden. "It needs some tending, and it's time to think about putting in some more flowers. Past time. I've been distracted, but we'll get back on schedule. I need to do more work on the virus. One day, Bert, when the time's right and I've perfected it, we're going to infect the Volkovs like a plague." She sighed. "But I can't think about that now. I have to think about this situation." She unzipped her hoodie as they moved into the woods, laid her hand briefly on the butt of her gun. The wild plums popped, fragrant petals among the tender haze of green, and the willow someone had planted years before dipped its lacy fingers toward the busy water of the stream. Wood violets spread a carpet of rich purple. In the quiet, in the scent, in the color, she calmed as they walked through sunlight and shade. Quivering in anticipation, Bert shot her a look, and on her go joyfully scrambled off the slope of the bank to splash in the water. It made her laugh, as always, to watch the big bruiser of a dog play like a toddler in a wading pool. She gave him his moment while she scanned the woods. Birds called, a musical lift accompanied by the rat-a-tat of a woodpecker hunting for lunch. The sun, through the filter of young leaves, cast a dreamy light. It would brighten as they walked, she knew, and the view would open to the hills. She loved looking out from the high ground, studying the rise and fall of the land. And here, in soft light and shadow, with the bird call and the mutter of the stream, the splashing dog, here, she thought, was more home than the house. She'd buy a bench. Yes, she'd go online later and find something organic and woodsy, something that looked as if it might have grown there. Of course, benches didn't grow, but it would have that illusion. And she could sit where the world opened to the hills, while her dog played in the stream. Maybe one day she'd feel secure enough to bring a book, sit on the bench in her woods with the hills outstretched beyond, and read while Bert splashed. But she had to stop thinking about the future. She had to deal with the right now, or the coming evening. All right. She signaled the dog, kept her distance as he raced out to shake a storm of water in the air. Brooks, she began while they walked, while I find you attractive and certainly enjoyed having sex with you, I'm not in a position to pursue a relationship. No, I'm not willing to engage in a relationship. That's firmer. I'm not willing to engage in a relationship. He'll ask why. That's his pattern, so I have to have an answer ready. My work is my priority and involves not only a great deal of time, but requires my focus. She repeated it, trying different inflections. It should be enough, but he's tenacious. I should say something about appreciating his interest. I don't want to make him angry or upset, or to damage his pride. I appreciate your interest. It's flattering. Flattering is good, yes. She took a long breath, relieved the panic didn't come again. Yes, she repeated. I could say, I'm flattered by your interest. And I am. It's easier to sound sincere if you are sincere. I'm flattered by your interest, and I've enjoyed our conversations. Should I bring up the sex again? God, how do people do this? Why do they? It's all so complicated and fraught. She lifted her face to the sun, breathing in the warmth and light as she came out of the trees. And looking out over the hills, she wondered. So many people out there, with so many connections, all those interpersonal relationships, parent, child, sibling, friend, lover, teacher, employer, neighbor. How did they all do it? How did they mix and mingle and juggle all those needs and dynamics, all those expectations and feelings? It was easier to live quietly and alone, with your own schedule, your own goals, meeting your own expectations and needs without constantly being required to add others to the mix. It's what her mother had done, and certainly Susan Fitch was successful on all fronts. Yes, the daughter had been a disappointment in the end, but then again, that's what happened when you added another individual. I'm not my mother, Abigail murmured as she laid a hand on Bert's head. I don't want to be. But even if I wanted relationships and complications, I can't. It's not possible. So, let's try it all again. While I find you attractive, she began. She worked on the content, tone, structure of the speech, even the body language for nearly an hour, fine-tuning it as she and Bert walked home again. Assuming the discussion and dinner should be civilized, she opened a bottle of Shiraz and had a half glass to steady her nerves. By 6:30, she had to order herself not to pace or pour another half glass of wine. When he drove up at 6:45, her nerves had taken the time to build again. She repeated her prepared speech in her head, using it to calm herself as she went to the door. Chapter 15. He really was pleasant to look at, she thought. It might take some time for the chemical reaction she experienced around him to dissipate. Sorry I'm late. With a grocery bag tucked in his arm, he walked to the porch. I had a couple things come up. It's all right. Hey, Bert. Casually, Brooks rubbed a hand over Bert's head as he walked into the house. Then he shifted his angle, laid his lips on Abigail's. How are you doing? I'm fine, thank you. I can take the bag to the kitchen. I've got it. He nodded toward the wine on the counter as he set the bag down. Nice. You said steak. This should go well with red meat. Good, because I've got a couple of fat New York strips in here. You didn't say what you wanted to have with the steak, so I wasn't sure what to fix. Nothing. I've got it. He pulled out 2 boat-sized potatoes and a bag of salad mix. What is that? Abigail tapped the bag. Salad. It's a bag-o' salad. Bag o' salad. Despite the nerves, her lips curved. I have plenty of fresh vegetables for salad.
That you have to chop up and so on. The beauty of bag o' salad is it's already done. Why don't you sit down? I'll get the potatoes on.
She didn't think she should sit. She hadn't practiced sitting down. Would you like to have our discussion before dinner?
Do we only get one?
I'm sorry? He glanced back at her as he took the potatoes to the sink to scrub.
Only one discussion? How about we talk before dinner, during, even after?
Well, yes, of course, but the discussion of the situation. Should we have that now, or would you prefer to wait until dinner?
What situation?
You and I. This social connection. The interpersonal relationship. He set the potatoes on the counter, and with a smile so warm it made something inside her ache, he took her face in his hands.
Interpersonal relationship. I'm next door to crazy about you.
He kissed her, strong, long, until the ache spread.
Would you mind pouring me some of that wine?
Yes. No, I don't mind pouring the wine. We need to discuss.
Discuss sounds like we're going to get into politics.
He frowned at the oven for a moment, then set it to bake the potatoes.
Why don't we stick with talk?
All right, we need to talk.
About our social connection and interpersonal relationship.
In reflex, her back stiffened. You're making fun of me.
A little. These are going to take a little while. Maybe we could go sit down. I could build us a fire.
Too cozy, she thought. Brooks.
So you can say it.
Say it?
My name. It's about the first time you've used it.
That couldn't be true. Could it? You're confusing me. I haven't even started and you're confusing me.
You're worried about what's happening between us. Is that right?
Relieved to begin, she took a breath. While I find you attractive and I enjoyed having sex with you, I'm not willing to engage in a relationship.
You already have.
What?
This is a relationship, Abigail, so you've already engaged in one.
I didn't intend to. I'm not willing to continue to engage in a relationship.
Why's that?
I'm flattered by your interest and I've enjoyed our conversations. However, my work requires a great deal of time and complete focus. I prefer not to be distracted and believe you require a more amenable and socially oriented companion. He took a sip of wine.
Did you practice that?
He pointed at her.
You did.
Every inch of her body stiffened with mortification. I failed to see why the fact that I wanted to be certain I articulated my thoughts and opinions clearly is amusing to you. The arctic tone of her voice did nothing to dim his grin.
I guess you'd have to be standing on my side of the room.
That's just another way to say point of view, which is your rationale for a great deal.
Yeah, it counts a lot to my way of thinking. Abigail, I figure you had to work on that little speech a while, because most of it's just bullshit.
If you're incapable of having a rational discussion, you should go. Wineglass in hand, body angled back to the counter, he remained as relaxed as she was rigid.
You weren't planning a discussion. You were going to orate your practice speech, then I was just supposed to mosey along. If you want me out, Abigail, then I think you're going to have to tell me what's bothering you, what you're afraid of, and what you feel.
I said I wasn't interested.
But you're not being truthful. I don't want to be with a woman who doesn't want to be with me, so if that's the case here, tell me. Give me enough courtesy and respect to explain it, and I'll grill up the steaks. We'll have a decent meal, and I'll go. That's about as fair as I can make it.
I told you, my work...
Abigail.
There was a world of patience in the word, and it lit a fire under her. Why doesn't anything go the way it's supposed to with you? Why can't you respond logically? I can't have a discussion with someone who refuses to be rational.
At the risk of setting you off, from where I'm standing, I'm being about as rational as anyone could.
Then stop.
Stop being rational?
She threw out her hands. I can't think.
Answer this. Do you have feelings for me?
I don't want to.
I take that as a yes, qualified. Why don't you want to?
I don't know what to do with them. With you. With this. I just want it to be quiet again. I just want my routine. I think that's reasonable.
Her voice pitched toward panic again, but she couldn't stop it from rising.
It's not quiet when you're here, and everything's off schedule and unpredictable. I can't even go to the market because then I'm walking with you and talking to your mother and playing with a puppy, and your mother's offering me peach sun tea. I just want to be left alone. I know how to be alone.
Let's get some air.
I don't want air.
Honey, you're shaking and you're having trouble getting your breath. Let's just take a minute, get some air, settle it down.
Don't take care of me. I've been taking care of myself since I was 17. I don't need anyone.
Brooks unlocked the back door.
Come on, Bert.
And, taking Abigail's hand, pulled her outside. If that's the case, then it's long past time you had someone willing to look out for you now and again who gives a goddamn. Now fucking breathe.
Don't swear at me.
Breathe, and I won't have to.
She pulled away from him, leaned against the porch post. Tears came along with the breath, so she pressed her face to the wood.
You want me on my knees, that's the way to do it.
Rubbing his hands over his face, Brooks dug for composure.
Abigail, if I'm responsible for making you this unhappy, you've got my word, I'll leave you be. But I wish to God you'd let me help you.
You can't help me.
How do you know?
She turned her face toward his. Why do you care?
I'd say you haven't had enough social interaction or interpersonal relationships if you don't understand why anyone would.
You're making fun of me again.
Not this time.
He didn't touch her, but his voice was a gentle stroke over raw nerves.
I've got feelings for you. I haven't sorted them all out yet, but I like having them.
She shook her head. It's just a chemical reaction.
So you've said. I took chemistry in high school, sucked at it. Am I making you this unhappy?
She wanted to say yes, because she believed he'd go and stay away. But she couldn't lie when he looked in her eyes. No, it makes me happy when I see you. I don't want to be happy because of you.
So, being happy makes you unhappy.
I know that doesn't sound rational, but it's accurate. I'm sorry I behaved that way.
Don't apologize.
He dug into his pocket, came up with a folded blue bandana.
Here you go now.
Despising herself, she sniffled. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you a question. If you're not ready to answer, say so, but don't lie to me. Is this about a husband, ex-husband, boyfriend, something on those lines, who hurt you?
No. No, there's no one like that. No one's hurt me.
You got hurt all over you. Are you saying no one physically hurt you?
Yes.
Calmer, she dabbed at her eyes with the soft, faded cloth, then stared out at her greenhouse.
I can take care of myself. I don't have husbands or boyfriends or relationships.
You've got one now. The relationship.
Stepping over, he took her chin in one hand, brushed at the drying tears on her cheeks with the other.
You're going to have to put that big brain of yours to work on how to deal with it.
I'm not like other people, Brooks.
You're unique. Why shouldn't you be?
You don't understand.
Then help me understand. How much could she tell him? If he understood just enough, maybe it would end it. I want my wine. I'll get it. Before she could comment, he'd stepped back inside. She took the moment to align her thoughts. No point in wishing for more time to prepare, she told herself. I don't need you to do things for me, she began when he came out with their wine. It's important to me that I do for myself. The wine? Seriously? He took his own to the porch steps, sat. Manners are important, too. Simple courtesies. My mother's a very capable, independent woman, but I'd have gotten her glass of wine. From what I've seen, what I know, you're as capable as they come. That doesn't mean I can't do you a courtesy. It's stupid. A little lost, she looked down at the cloth, turned it in her hands. I hate being stupid. And it wasn't what I was going to say anyway. Why don't you sit down here and say what you're going to say? She hesitated, then signaled to Bert that he could go into the yard, and sat. I am capable of most things, but I don't believe I'm capable of maintaining a relationship. Because? When my mother decided she wanted a child, she researched donors. So she wasn't involved with anyone? No, no one she wanted to procreate with. Procreate, Brooks thought. That was a telling word. She'd reached a point in her life where she wanted a child. That's not accurate, Abigail decided. She wanted an offspring, and she had very specific, very detailed requirements for the donor. My mother is a very intelligent woman, and naturally she wanted to produce an intelligent offspring. She required high intellect, good health, including family medical history. She had physical requirements, in appearance and body type, stamina. I get the picture. When she'd determined the donor, she scheduled the conception date, through artificial insemination, to correlate with her own personal and professional calendar. Naturally, she arranged the finest prenatal care available, and I was born through a scheduled cesarean section and proved very healthy, of the proper weight and size. She had, of course, already arranged for a nurse, so I was given excellent care, and tested and examined regularly to be certain my development was strong. The bird song, so happy, seemed out of place, as did the sudden jeweled whirl of a hummingbird toward a pot of scarlet dianthus. Do you know all this because you found out, or because she told you? She told me. I always knew. The knowledge was part of my education. Education, along with my physical health, were priorities. My mother is exceptionally beautiful, and she had some disappointment in that while my features are pleasing enough, my coloring good, I didn't reach the level in appearance she'd hoped for. But I made up for it with intellect and motor skills and retention. Overall, she was very satisfied. Oh, baby. She hunched in when he put his arm around her shoulders. Don't feel sorry for me. You're just going to have to swallow that one. I'm telling you this so you understand my basic genetic makeup. My mother, while satisfied with me on the whole, never loved me or wished to. She never accepted I might have my own goals or desires or plans. Hers, for me, were again very specific and detailed. For a very long time, I thought she didn't love me because I was lacking in some area, but I came to understand she simply didn't love. She has no capacity or aptitude for love, and no skills at displaying affection. Factoring genetics and environment, I also lack the capacity. I may not have the skills for relationships, but I understand emotions and affection are primary needs in developing and maintaining them. Brooks thought, what a load of crap. But he structured his response more carefully. Let me get this straight. Because your mother's cold, selfish, and appears to have all the finer feelings of a sand flea, you're genetically predestined to be the same.
That's very harsh.
I can be harsher.
There's no need. When factoring both genetics and environment, what's often termed nature and nurture,
I know what the hell it is.
Now you're angry.
That's a mild term for it, but not with you. Let me ask you something else. If you're so genetically incapable of love and affection, how come you love that dog, and he loves you back, and don't try to pass it off as training?
We need each other.
Need's one part of it. If he got hurt or sick and couldn't function as a guard dog, would you get rid of him?
Of course not.
Because it would be cold and selfish and downright mean, and you're none of that. And because you love him.
He's a dog, not a person. There are people who feel strongly for and about animals and don't have the same feelings for or about people.
You feel something for me.
With no helpful answer, Abigail stared down into her wine.
What about your father?
Donor.
Okay, what about the donor? If she didn't tell you specifically who he was, you found out. You're too smart to let that slide.
She wouldn't give me his name or certain details. When I was 12, I accessed the information.
She kept files.
My conclusion is, she felt it important to keep track of his health, any potential problem areas. So yes, she kept files. I hacked into them.
At 12.
I've always had an interest in computers. He's a physicist, very successful and respected. He was in his early 20s when he donated, several years younger than my mother at the time.
Does he know about you?
No, it's not done.
You could have contacted him.
Why? Why would I disrupt his life, his family? We have a biological connection and nothing more.
He has a family.
Yes, he married at 31. At the time I accessed the information, he had one child and was expecting another. He has 3 children now. I'm not one of them. I'm the result of a donation.
Is she still married?
Yes.
So he can develop and maintain a relationship. You've got his genes, too.
For a moment, a long moment, she watched the flight of the hummingbird, that sapphire blur, until it whizzed out of sight. Why would you want to be with someone whose skills and aptitude for personal connections are stunted?
Maybe I like the idea of watching them grow and being part of it. Then there's the fact I'm hung up on you. Factor those together.
There are other reasons I shouldn't let this continue. I can't tell you what they are.
Yet. I know you're on the run from something. Something that scares you enough you need that dog, all this security, all those guns. Whatever it is has you behind locks, actual and metaphorical. When you trust me enough, when you figure out that needing help isn't the same as being weak and needy, you'll tell me. But for now, I should fire up that grill.
She got to her feet when he did. How much of your interest in me is wondering what's behind the locks? She needed honesty, maybe more than most, so he'd give her honesty.
It started out that way. I still wonder, partly because a cop always wonders. But mostly now, when you opened those locks even a little, Abigail, you got me. You got me,
he repeated, taking her hand, pressing it to his heart. She looked at her hand, felt that strong, steady beat, and let herself go, let herself lay her cheek there. When his arms came around her, she squeezed her eyes shut, and the emotions rose so fast, so hard and fast. To be held like this on a cool spring night by someone who cared. It was like a miracle. even for someone who didn't believe in them. I still don't know what to do with this, with you, with any of it.
Let's see how it goes.
I can try. Will you stay tonight? He pressed his lips to the crown of her head.
Thought you'd never ask.
She stepped back, steadied herself by looking into his eyes. I'll go make a dressing for the bago salad. And saw that quick flash of humor light his face.
That'd be great.
When she went inside, he walked over, took the cover off her grill. Oh, she had him all right, he thought, more than was comfortable. But he believed he'd get used to it, just like he believed easing open those locks, a little at a time, would be worth the effort. In Chicago, only 2 blocks from the club where Ilya had met Elizabeth Fitch one summer night, he toured the dingy apartment that housed one of their most profitable computer scam operations. He often oversaw this area himself, so while his presence generated some nerves, work continued smoothly. Several operators worked computers, blasting out spam advertising job offers for work at home, Canadian pharmacies, online dating, free downloads. Some would generate fees, handled by phone operators who conned those naive or desperate enough to call in. Others would simply steal credit card information, which could be translated into quick profit or identity theft. Here, the overhead was low, the profit rich and regular. He'd personally designed a variation on the tried-and-true Nigerian scam that continued to be their top moneymaker. It brought him considerable pride. He enjoyed the work and considered it an intellectual exercise. Business was good, increased from the previous year. No amount of warnings posted online, touted on the nightly news exposés, curbed the hunger in human nature for easy money. And the only weapons needed to strip the foolish from their wallets were a computer and a phone. He accepted violence, inflicted it when necessary, ordered it when it was warranted, but he preferred bloodless crime. He considered himself a businessman and would soon take a wife, make a family of his own. He would teach his sons to be businessmen and to leave the blood to others. Men like Korotky would always be useful, but he had higher plans for the sons he'd make. He enjoyed hearing the phones ring and the operators read the prepared script, improvising when necessary. Yes, you can earn money at home, increase your income, set your own schedule. For a small fee, we'll provide you with all you need. Of course, they'd provide nothing of use, but the fee would already be deposited. The mark would be out just under $40 American. Really, a small price for a lesson learned. He spoke briefly with the supervisor, made a note of the day's take, then strode for the door. He enjoyed, too, the communal breath of relief behind him as he stepped out the door. He'd been born for power, and wore it as naturally as his favored Versace suits. He walked out of the apartment building to his waiting car. He slipped into the back, said nothing to the driver. As the SUV pulled away from the curb, he texted his mistress. He expected her to be ready for him in 2 hours. Then he texted his fiancée. He'd be late, but hoped to be finished with his meeting and other business by midnight. The car pulled to the curb again outside the restaurant, closed tonight for a private party. His father insisted on this face-to-face meeting every month, though, in Ilya's opinion, so much could have been accomplished more efficiently through Skype and conference calls. Still, Ilya saw some value to the personal connections, and there would be good food, good vodka, and the company of men. Inside, he handed off his cashmere topcoat to the pretty, slow-eyed brunette. When time allowed, he'd like to fuck her while she wore those black-framed glasses. His father already sat with several others at the big table set in the main dining room. Sergei's smile spread wide when he saw his son.
"Come, sit. You are late." "I had some business."
Ilya bent down, kissed his father's cheeks, then his uncle's.
"I have the numbers for the 51st Street operation. I wanted to give them to you tonight. You'll be pleased." "Very good."
Sergei poured Ilya's vodka himself before lifting his glass. At 70, he remained robust, a man who enjoyed life's pleasures and rewards to the fullest.
"To family," he toasted, "to friends and good business."
They discussed business while they ate, and always at these meetings ate traditional Russian food. Ilya spooned up borscht as he listened to reports from brigadiers and trusted soldiers. Out of respect, he asked questions only when he received his father's nod. Over braised spring lamb, Ilya reported on the businesses he oversaw personally. Problems were discussed: the arrest of a soldier on drug charges, a whore who'd required discipline, the interrogation and dispatch of a suspected informant.
"Misha will speak," Sergei announced, "on the business of our people inside the police."
Ilya pushed his plate aside. Too much food in the belly and he wouldn't enjoy his mistress fully. He looked at his cousin as he sipped his wine.
"Picto says he hasn't yet been able to find how the information on some of our business is being fed to the FBI. "Then why do we pay him?" Sergei demanded. "Yes, uncle, I asked just that. He has warned us on some occasions in time for us to take steps to protect our interests, but he can't identify the contact within the Bureau or the method of information. He believes the contact is one of 3 people, but they keep a tight lid on this. He asks for more time and resources. More money. For bribes, he says."
Misha, now the father of 4, continued to eat with gusto. Ilya knew his cousin didn't have a mistress to satisfy.
"I don't question his loyalty, but I begin to think he and the 2 others we have in place aren't high enough on the food chain to meet our needs." "We will look into these 3 people. Ilya, you and Misha will take this business. Whoever this FBI police is, whoever the informant, we will end it. This costs us money, men, time, and offends."
Now Sergei pushed aside his plate.
"This brings me to old business. We don't forget Elizabeth Fitch." "There's no contact with her mother," Ilya began. "None with the police that we have ever found. If she continues to live, she lives in fear. She's no threat. As long as she lives, she's a threat. And again an insult. This Keegan, we pay him, and he's useful. But he doesn't find her. The others, they cannot find her. She is one woman."
He banged his fist on the table.
"How can we hold our pride if we are defeated by one woman?" "We won't stop looking," Ilya assured him. "No, we will never stop. It's a matter of honor. Yakov." "Yes, uncle."
The years sat lightly on Korotky, as they did on a man who enjoyed his work.
"Speak to Keegan. Remind him why this is important. And speak to Picto as well. Money is motivation, yes? So is fear. Make them afraid." "Yes, uncle." "Good. This is good. Now,"
Sergei clapped his hands together,
"we will have dessert."
Chapter 16. It seemed easy, almost natural. She wondered if she'd crossed some boundary and now lived in the normal she'd always yearned for. She didn't know how it could possibly last, so every moment of that easy, natural, normal glittered bright and precious as diamonds. He was with her almost every evening. Sometimes she cooked, sometimes he brought food. They might sit outside or take a walk to her favorite spot overlooking the hills. He helped her in the garden, taught her to play gin rummy on a rainy night, then feigned disgust when she beat him every game. He made her laugh. When he touched her in the dark, all the worries, all the doubts brewing inside her just dropped away. Every time she woke with him in bed beside her, the happy jolt of surprise stayed with her for hours. She learned of the townspeople from him, putting pictures together in her mind from the funny stories or offhand comments he made. The clerk who often waited on her at the market stood as undisputed champion of the pie-eating contest held every July 4th in the park. The manager of the bank was an amateur magician who performed at kids' parties. Brooke's oldest, closest friend was expecting his second child. Brooks might be called away in the evening, and twice he had to handle a call in the middle of the night. Whenever she found herself alone, the house felt different. Not like it did during the day when her work, her routine flowed along, but as if something essential was missing. When it did, she tried to ignore the nagging sensation that when it all ended, nothing would ever feel completely balanced and whole again. So she focused on the moment, the hour, the day, the night, then the next. She tried to relax and see how it would go. Together, they stood studying the flower bed they'd just finished. Most of the plants she'd nurtured along in her greenhouse, and seeing them in place as she'd pictured in her head brought her pleasure. Having help, she discovered, didn't diminish that pleasure at all. She liked feeling a little grubby, a little sweaty, a little tired, and knowing the spinach lasagna she'd put together earlier only had to slip into the oven. "It looks very attractive." "It looks great," he corrected. "It looks great, but it'll look better in another few weeks. It was nice having help." He shot her a grin. "Really?" "Really. Would you like a beer?" "I'm on call, so better not. Could use a Coke." "All right." So simple, she thought, as she went inside. She liked getting him a drink, fixing him a meal. Cooking for someone besides herself, she'd discovered, brought serious satisfaction. Just as she liked him suggesting he bring home a pizza or Chinese or toss some burgers on the grill. She'd thought it would feel crowded. The house, her life, her routine, with him in it, but somehow it felt bigger. She'd worried that her work, the business, and her personal agendas would suffer with someone else taking up her time and space, but she'd been very productive the last couple weeks. So many of the little tasks or chores took less time as he pitched in to help or just did them himself. They weren't living together, she reminded herself as she poured the Coke over ice. She couldn't let it go that far. But he had a toiletry kit in the bathroom, a few clothes in the closet. She liked looking at them when he wasn't around, just looking at his shirt, his razor, a pair of socks. They served as tangible evidence he was in her life. or the life she was trying to build. She glanced out the window as she heard the dogs bark, Brooks's laughter. Bert chased the yellow tennis ball as if his world relied on its capture. The play equaled not only fun, but good exercise. Still, it was odd to watch the dog respond so easily to the man. Amis, she thought. Yes, they'd become friends. She picked up her glass of ice water, carried it and his Coke outside.
Thanks. That dog would chase a ball to Texas if I could throw it that far.
He enjoys the run, and it's good for him. He likes it when you throw the ball because you can throw it farther than I can.
He's given me a workout. I won't need any infield practice on Saturday at this rate.
When the phone rang, it relieved her. He wouldn't ask again, he wouldn't pressure her, but she knew he'd like her to come to the park on Saturday where he played softball. She wasn't ready, and didn't know if she'd ever be ready to face all the people who'd come, who'd talk to her or about her. She picked up the wet, mangled tennis ball, threw it so Bert could continue his game. She heard Brooks say,
"I'm on my way."
Then, when he stuck the phone back on his belt,
"Crap.
There's some trouble?"
Spoiled rich kid gets high, trashes hotel suite, slugs hotel manager."
"Oh, your friend Russ Conroy?"
"Yeah. Justin Blake equals spoiled rich kid. He tried to fight with hotel security and is now being held by same until I get there. I'm sorry."
"It's your job."
"And this one's going to take a while, as it involves a belligerent, troublemaking asshole, his annoying, enabling, and influential father, and the long-suffering lawyer the kid's behavior keeps in Gucci loafers and Chivas Regal. I may not make it back tonight."
"It's all right."
"Easy for you to say. You're not missing lasagna."
"I'll keep some for you. It holds well."
"Thanks. I'll call you either way. I've got to wash up some before I head in."
He took her hands, leaned in to kiss her.
"I'll miss you."
She liked to think he would, a little anyway. Being missed by someone was another first in her life. The dog trotted up as Brooks went inside, then simply stood, panting a little, the ball clamped in his mouth, his eyes on the door. "He'll come back if he can," Abigail said. "We have to be all right without him, too. It's important we're all right on our own." As she threw the ball again, she thought she'd just make a salad for her dinner. Eating the lasagna by herself seemed too lonely. The Inn of the Ozarks stood on a gentle hill just inside the town limits. The 4-story Victorian had been built by a successful bootlegger back in the 1920s as a country home. His success had come to a hard stop just days before the end of Prohibition, when a rival had shot him with a Henry rifle while the man took a turn on his veranda with a Cuban and a glass of moonshine. The widow had never returned to the house, and for some years thereafter it fell into disrepair. The oldest son, who liked to play the ponies, sold it the minute it came into his hands. Russ's grandfather rebuilt and redesigned it largely on his own, and opened it as a hotel in the spring of 1948. While not a raging success during Cecil Conroy's day, it held its own. As the artist community took shape in the 70s and 80s, it graced many canvases, one of which had the good fortune to catch the eye of a wealthy collector in New York. Inspired by the painting, the collector, as well as some of his friends and associates, began to make the hotel the base for getaways, business/pleasure interludes, and assignations. As a result, by the turn of the century, the hotel had earned a facelift and the addition of a spa and an indoor pool. Its 4th floor included the perk of 24-hour butler service and held the most prestigious suite in the building. With Russ beside him, Brooks stood in that suite, with its pale gold walls, its dark-toned, gleaming antiques, its glowing local art. Glass sparkled on the polished chestnut floor from the broken prisms of the once grand parlor chandelier. The heavy, blown glass vase that had surely been thrown into the 60-inch flat-screen TV lay shattered on the hand-woven rug that bore stains from the contents of one of 3 empty bottles of red wine. The remains of a Tiffany lamp shone on the debris of dishes, wasted food, overflowing soap dishes filled with butts, and a scattering of porn DVDs. The blue and gold silk of the sofa fabric bore cigarette burns like ugly eyes. "And you should see the bedroom," Russ commented around a split and puffy lip. "Motherfuckers." "I'm sorry about this, Russ. The master bath's jet tub is stained with this wine, with piss. One of them broke the faucet clean off. Don't ask about the toilet. We're going to need pictures, before and after. Can you ballpark the monetary damage just to give me a picture?" "More than 75,000, probably closer to 100. Jesus, I don't know, Brooks. Could be more once we get under what we can see and smell." "How many were in here?" 3. Girls in and out, too. They booked it under Justin's father's name, used his card at check-in. Justin and a girl. That was last evening. Sometime last night, we'll check the lobby security tapes. The other 2 boys, that's his usual crew, Chad Cartwright, Doyle Parsons, and 2 more girls came in. Justin told the desk to let them up. No law against having guests in your room. They stayed the night. The desk and security fielded a few complaints about noise from the other guests. Best I can tell, the girls left this afternoon, and the other 3 spent the day smoking weed, ordering room service, watching porn. About 6, we started getting complaints again. Yelling, crashing, wild laughter, banging. They had the damn door barricaded, wouldn't open it for the floor manager. I came up. Jesus, you could smell the weed in the damn hall. Brooks just nodded. Let Russ spill it out. His friend's hands still shook some from what Brooks understood was rage and a kind of grief. "I told that little fuckhead if he didn't unblock the doors, I'd be calling the police and his father. Nothing against the fear and awe you generate, Brooks, but I think it was the threat to call his old man and the rest of their parents that got me in. Then that cocksucker sneered at me. Sneered. And told me to fuck off. The room was paid for. I could see what they'd done here, or some of it. See the other 2 sprawled out on the floor. I was too mad to let loose, you know what I mean." "I do." "I told the floor manager who was with me to get security. That's when that piece of shit sucker punched me." Gingerly, he rubbed a finger over his abused lip. "Carolee, you know Carolee." "I do." "She grabbed her walkie, called for Ben, told him to bring a couple of the bigger bellhops. She thinks on her feet. I've got the fuckwit up against the door now, and the other 2 are so wasted they're pissing themselves laughing. And he humps at the door, gives Carolee this shit-eaten grin, and tells her she ought to come on in, how he'll fuck some life into her." Jesus Christ. Struggling to calm, Russ pressed his fingers to his eyes. "He just wouldn't quit, Brooks. Ben and the others came on the run, and that's when he starts kicking, trying to punch, starts screaming. Carolee called the station, and Boyd came right quick. He sent for Ash for backup, and we all figured they should let you know." "Figured right. He likely stole the credit card from his father, but the parents, they'll back him up, say they let him use it. Can't prove otherwise. But the damage here, the assaults." Brooks realized he needed to calm a bit himself. "I'm going to have Boyd come in, with Alma. She takes good pictures. She'll document all of this, and Boyd's going to do an official search in her presence and yours or Carolee's for illegal substances. Even if they smoked and snorted everything they had, there'll be trace. And goddamn, I can see the joints mixed in with cigarettes in those soap dishes. His daddy won't buy that vicious moron out of this one.
Not if you press charges. You can bet your ass on that. Good. I'm going to call them in now. If you put Carolee on this, you can ride in with me. You can make an official statement, press charges. You get your insurance people on this, get me a good, solid inventory and assessment of damages.
Russ nodded. The high color in his face began to fade to a sickly white that wasn't much better.
I already called them. All right, then. You need some time first? No.
Russ covered his face with his hands, scrubbed hard.
God, I feel sick. I've got to tell my parents. It makes me sick what they did here, but I don't need time. Then let's get started.
Brooks thought he could have written it himself in 3 acts. Justin Blake goes on one of his personal rampages, the authorities are called and take the arrogant shithead into custody. Before you could say you have the right to remain silent, Lincoln Blake strides in, lawyer in tow. In the time Brooks drove to the hotel, surveyed the worst of the damage, spoke with Russ, then drove to the station, Lincoln Blake had already arrived with his lawyer. Blake pushed to his feet. He cut an imposing figure with his broad chest in a well-cut suit, his bull neck caged in a striped tie. Cool blue eyes peered out above a sharp nose. He wore his slate-gray hair cut military short, though rumor was Blake had successfully dodged the draft, when there'd been a draft to dodge.
Russell, I understand my son and his friends may be responsible for a little breakage at your hotel. I want to assure that if this proves to be the case, we'll take care of it. Don't you worry now.
Mr. Blake, I'll apologize for being rude, though it doesn't feel sincere at this moment, but I don't want to talk to you. Brooks, I'm going to go sit in your office if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Now, Russell, Blake began, but Russ kept walking. Blake's face set hard.
A hotelier should understand that a certain percentage of overhead has to be earmarked for breakage and overuse. Mr. Blake, I don't much want to talk to you now either.
As Brooks topped him in height, Blake couldn't look down his nose, but the sentiment was clear.
You're a paid employee of this town, and you won't last a year in this position with that attitude. I'll take my chances. I assume you're going to tell me Justin had permission to use your credit card for the suite at the hotel, for all the room service and miscellaneous charges. Of course. Then that's your business. The rest is mine. I want my son released immediately. We'll pay for any damages incurred, naturally. Then you ought to know those damages are going to approach, if not exceed, 6 figures. Yeah.
Brooks nodded when Blake's eyes rounded as his face reddened.
They did a number on those rooms. If Russell Conroy or his father, whom I have always respected, think for one short minute they can inflate this business to exploit, 2 of my officers are at the hotel right now, documenting the damages. The insurance agent is also on his way to do the same. I've just come from there and seen it for myself. My officers will also be doing a search for illegal substances as the place reeked of marijuana. I don't know where your son or his friends got the red wine or the brandy, the beer and the other assorted alcohol, the containers of which were all over the damn place, but they are all under the legal drinking age. Added to it, your son assaulted Russ. Don't you bluster at me this time, Brooks snapped. He assaulted Russ in front of witnesses. He also assaulted the security guard in front of witnesses. I want to speak to my son. Now. No. I will speak with him and his lawyer can be present and speak with him, but while he's under the legal drinking age, he is also legally an adult. It may not make much sense, but that's the law. You'll speak to him when I'm done with him, and Mr. Blake, you can't buy the Conroys off like you have the others. They won't be bought. This time, Justin's going to pay for what he's done. Push too hard, Gleason. You push on this and you'll lose your job. Like I said, I'll take my chances. Now, I assume Justin asked for a lawyer, but I'm going to check. Until I know he's engaged that right, nobody talks to him. Brooks walked over to Jeff Noel, one of his part-time deputies, who was doing his best to look invisible. Did he ask for a lawyer, Jeff? Do you know?
Yes, sir. He was bitching about a lawyer when Ash and Boyd brought them all in, and yelling at the other two prisoners to keep their mouths shut.
All right, then. Brooks walked back. You've got a client, Harry.
I'd like to speak with my client privately at this time.
Sure. Jeff, you take Mr. Darnell to his client.
Yes, sir, Chief. Ignoring Blake, Brooks walked to his office, shut the door.
Justin lawyered up, as expected. They'll have their confab, then I'll talk to him. Want some coffee?
No, I got some water. I don't think I can stomach anything else.
I'm going to take your official statement. We're going to do this by all the steps, Russ. I'm going to warn you, Blake's going to try to pressure you and your family to take a payoff. Let the kids slide.
Color, nearly as red as his hair, rode up on Russ's cheeks. There isn't enough money in the world. My mama bought that chandelier in Waterford, Ireland, had it shipped all the way back here just for that parlor. It was her pride and joy. For that alone, Brooks.
I know it. I'm going to record this.
Okay. Russ closed his eyes a moment, nodded. Okay. When they'd finished, Brooks took a long study of his friend's face. That angry color had faded, so the freckles stood out like mottling on the sick pallor of his face.
I'd like to have Jeff drive you home, but you're going to want to go back to the hotel.
I have to.
I know it. He'll take you. I'm going to be here a while. I'll come over to your place when I'm done, if you want.
I'd appreciate it, Brooks. If you could call anyway, let me know how you think things stand.
I will, and I'll come to where you are after I do. I don't want anybody cleaning up that mess yet, all right?
How long do you think—
Never mind.
Russ held up a hand.
All right. I told Boyd to put police tape on the door. I know it's not what you'd like, but the tougher we make this, the better chance we have of getting it all the way through if the Blakes decide to go to court.
You do what you have to do.
There's one last thing.
Brooks opened a drawer and took out a digital camera.
Say shit.
Russ let out a little laugh, sighed, then scowled at the camera. Shit. When Brooks left his office, he noted Blake was no longer in the outer area. Probably gone off to hound the mayor or burn up the cell towers with calls to the state rep, the frickin' governor. It's a sorry shame, Alma said, and handed Brooks an envelope. I took a boatload of pictures, like you said. About broke my heart, too.
This won't.
Boyd held up a trio of evidence bags.
We got your marijuana, your cocaine, and some oxy to round it off. That'll work. Did you log it in? All nice and official. We got the video camera like you said we should, and Ash ran it while I did the search. Can't document much clearer.
Good work, all of you. Is Harry still back there?
He hasn't come out. I'm going back, starting with the ringleader.
Boyd, why don't you take Chad Cartwright, and Ash, you talk to Doyle Parsons. You remind them of their rights again, you hear? And you get everything on record. If either of them says lawyer, you stop."
"They didn't ask for one yet, or for a call either," Ash told him. "Last I checked, both of them were passed out back there. Give them a wake-up call."
Brooks went back to the tiny conference room. He banged on the door, shoved it open.
"It's time you and I had a talk, Justin."
Justin continued to sprawl in the chair, one arm thrown carelessly over its back. He only curled his lip.
"Chief, if I could have a word with you."
Harry got up, murmured something to Justin that had the boy jerk a shrug. Harry came out, closed the door. He was a head shorter than Brooks and about 15 years his senior. Back in the day, Harry had coached Brooks's Little League team to a championship.
"Brooks, I realize that between the three of these young men there was some damage done to the hotel suite, and I understand there was some underage drinking. The fact is, they'll make good on the damages, if indeed there are any, and my client is permitted an independent assessor in that matter, and we both know the drinking's not going to go anywhere. Slap on the wrist, some counseling maybe. As for the claim of assault, Justin tells me Russ was understandably upset, and there was some mutual pushy-shovey. Now—"
Brooks pulled the digital print of Russ's split and swollen lip out of his file.
"Does that look like pushy-shovey to you?"
Harry stared down at the photo, then just sighed, raked his hands through his short thatch of brown hair.
"Don't you ever get tired of doing this dance?"
Harry waved a hand, shook his head.
"I've got to do my job, Brooks."
"You know,
there are days I think my job sucks. Yours sucks more."
Brooks opened the door. He took out a tape recorder, put it on the table. He noted the night had taken some of the shine off Justin's gold and bronzed Prince of the City looks. Good, Brooks thought, looking into the cocky, bloodshot eyes.
"Were you read your rights, Justin?"
"Yeah, I got the right to say fuck you."
"Justin,"
Harry warned.
"Freedom of speech. I'll exercise that same right. You want to look at these, counselor."
Brooks poured the photos on the table as he sat. As Harry studied them, Brooks studied the boy. Justin Blake, the only child of Lincoln and Jenny Blake, had been born into money, prestige, and good looks. Chiseled features, sulky mouth, sizzling blue eyes, and thick, sun-kissed hair likely ensured he'd had his pick of girls through his high school years. He might have made something of himself, Brooks considered. Maybe he still would. But up to this point, the money, prestige, and good looks had translated into arrogance, a mean temperament, and a vicious disrespect for any kind of authority.
"Justin Blake, you're charged with destruction of property, vandalism, underage drinking, and 3 counts of assault." "Big fucking deal." "Oh, it will be, as will the possession charges. We have the weed, the coke, and the oxy you and your fellow morons had in the suite."
Justin only smirked.
"I don't know what you're talking about." "We got your prints on file already. I'll just bet we're going to find them on that bag of weed, the bag of blow, maybe even on the pills. You're on probation, and one of the terms of that probation is no drugs, no drinking, no trouble. You did the hat trick. My father'll have me out of here in an hour. If Harry wants to earn his big fat fee, he'll have the rest fixed before morning." "No and no. Not this time. Russell Conroy has just officially pressed charges. My deputies have interviewed witnesses. We have, as you can see, photo documentation of the havoc you wreaked. We have the drugs, the alcohol, and shortly we'll be picking up the girls you entertained last night. I just think it would be icing on the cake if any one of them happened to be under the age of 18, 'cause then I get to add statutory rape and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. But even without the icing, You're not getting probation, counseling, and community service this time. You'll do some time."
Justin lifted his middle finger.
"An hour. In violation of your probation, and look at the time. It's after 8 o'clock. Too late for a bail hearing tonight. You'll be a guest of our fine facilities until 10 tomorrow morning, at which time we'll go before the judge and lay it all out." "Bullshit."
"Chief Gleason," Harry began, "my client's parents are respected members of the community. I believe we can safely release Justin into their supervision for one night."
Brooks leveled one look, hard as granite. "That's not going to happen. He stays. I may not be able to stop the judge from granting bail tomorrow, but until then, he's mine." "You're nothing. You're just some glorified rent-a-cop trying to swing his dick around. My father could buy and sell you 12 times out of fucking petty cash. You can't do anything to me." "It'd be a shame if you thought of your own worth by your father's bank account. If I gave a rat's ass about your twisted inner child. What I can do to you is this. I can arrest you and charge you, which is already done. I can incarcerate you until such time a judge tells me different. I can, and believe me, I will, testify at your trial, should you choose to take this to trial, and detail every bit of your vicious, useless, destructive behavior."
"I'd like another moment alone with my client."
"You've had over a half hour with him already."
"Brooks, I need a moment with my client."
"All right, then. When you're done, he's going in a cell."
Brooks stepped out. It took less than 10 seconds for the screaming to start. He knew it was small of him, and likely unprofessional on top of that, but damn if it didn't do his heart good to hear Justin throw a tantrum worthy of a 2-year-old brat.